A single, unexpected moment of connection turned what should have been a simple home repair into something neither of us could have anticipated. It started with a burst pipe. Nothing romantic about that. He arrived at my door, all business, just a plumber doing his job, focused, professional. But something shifted as he worked beneath my sink. Our casual conversation deepened. One lingering glance. Our eyes met as he handed me a wrench, our fingers brushing for a second too long. We didn't say anything, but we both felt it. As he packed his tools to leave, something unspoken hung between us. "I'll need to come back tomorrow to finish this," he said, his voice softer, a little lower. I nodded, knowing tomorrow might bring more than just a fixed pipe. I didn't expect the job to take 3 days, or that by the third, fixing my plumbing would be the last thing either of us cared about. The call came at the worst possible time. Water was flooding my kitchen floor, spilling from beneath the sink in relentless waves. I was buried in deadlines and back-to-back Zoom calls, working from home all week. The last thing I needed was a plumbing disaster. Frantically Googling emergency services while trying to contain the mess with every towel I owned, I finally got someone on the line. "We've got a tech who can be there in 30 minutes, she said. "Yes, please." "As soon as possible," I replied, eyeing the water creeping toward my living room. Those 30 minutes felt endless. I shuffled soaked towels to the bathtub and tried to keep up with work emails, my socks drenched, nerves frayed. When the doorbell finally rang, I yanked it open, expecting an older guy in a stained uniform with a name embroidered on his chest. But instead I found him. He couldn't have been much older than me, early 30s. Dark hair cropped close on the sides, longer on top, copper-colored eyes. A quiet confidence in the way he stood. "I'm James," he said, "from Reliable Plumbing." "Matt," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Kitchen's this way. Sorry, it's a mess." He nodded, toolbox in hand. As he passed me, I caught the faint scent of something woodsy, clean. He wore the standard blue work uniform, but it fit him differently. Broad across the shoulders, snug at the waist. "Wow," he said, taking in the chaos. "That's quite a leak." I ran a hand through my hair. "It started about 40 minutes ago. I shut the water off to the house, but—" I gestured helplessly at the puddles gleaming on the tiles. "You did the right thing," James said, kneeling to open his toolbox. "Let me take a look." As he disappeared under the sink, I found myself watching the way he moved. Efficient, calm, completely in control. There was something magnetic about it. I caught myself staring at the stretch of his shirt across his back, then looked away quickly. "So, you work from home?" he asked from under the cabinet. "Yeah, marketing. Mostly digital campaigns." "Must be nice, not having to commute." "It has its perks," I said, smiling faintly. "Though today, I wouldn't mind having an office to run away to." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "I can imagine." "Ah, here it is. You've got a split in your supply line. Looks like a pressure buildup, did it? Give me a second." I watched his hands move. Precise. Steady. It had been a long time since I'd had anyone in my space. Since my breakup 6 months ago, I'd mostly stayed home. The occasional delivery guy, a few failed dates from apps I eventually deleted. My social life had turned into video calls and work chats. "Could you hand me that wrench?" James's voice broke through my thoughts. I knelt beside the toolbox, searching. "This one?" "The adjustable one. Right side." I picked it up and crouched beside him to pass it over. Our hands brushed. We locked eyes. Just for a second. His eyes were flecked with gold. There was a shadow of stubble on his jaw. The air changed, quiet but electric. "Thanks," he said, voice a shade deeper. "No problem," I replied, a little too fast. He ducked back under the sink. I stood up, trying to focus on soaking up the rest of the water, ignoring the heat in my chest. I was being ridiculous. Just a plumber. Just a job. 20 minutes later, he emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good news and bad news." "Hit me," I said, leaning on the counter. "Good news, I fixed the leak. Bad news, it's a temporary patch. Your pipe's corroded in multiple spots. You'll need a full replacement." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "How long would that take?" It usually took just a couple of hours, but James glanced at his watch. "I've got another emergency call after this. The earliest I can come back is tomorrow, first thing. That's fine, I said, realizing I'd have to manage without the sink until then. I can work around it. Alex nodded and started packing up his tools. I'll turn the water back on for the rest of the house, but you'll need to keep it off at the sink until I return. Got it? What time should I expect you? Would 8:30 work? I can make you my first stop. That's perfect, I said, following him to the door. Thanks for coming so quickly. He smiled and something in my chest fluttered unexpectedly. All part of the service. See you tomorrow, Matt. As I closed the door, I felt a strange anticipation. It was just a plumbing repair, I reminded myself. Nothing more. Yet as I returned to my desk, I kept getting distracted. Thoughts of copper-colored eyes and steady, capable hands clouding my focus. I didn't sleep well that night. The pressure of an upcoming presentation weighed heavily on me, made worse by the half-functioning kitchen. By the time morning arrived, I was on my second cup of coffee, answering emails when the doorbell rang, right at 8:30. Alex stood at my doorstep, somehow looking fresh despite the early hour. His hair was damp, like he just showered, and his uniform looked newer than yesterday's. Morning, he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Ready for surgery? I stepped back to let him in, suddenly aware that I was still in sleep pants and a faded t-shirt. Honestly, I forgot you were coming this early, I admitted. I've been up since 6, prepping for my presentation. No worries, I can work around you. I led him to the kitchen where I'd cleared space for my laptop. I've got a video call in about an hour, but I can take it in the bedroom if the noise is too much. James shook his head, already kneeling under the sink. It shouldn't be too bad, though I might have to cut into the wall a bit to get to the pipe. Do whatever you need to, I said, settling at my laptop. I trust you. As I worked, I became increasingly aware of James moving around the kitchen. He spread out a tarp under the sink and arranged his tools neatly. Sometimes he'd ask me to pass something or hold a flashlight while he worked in the cramped space. Every time our hands touched or our eyes met, that flutter in my chest returned. It was silly, I told myself. He was just being polite, friendly, professional. Still, I couldn't ignore the way his gaze sometimes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, or how our conversations stretched longer than they needed to. So what's this presentation about? He asked, measuring a section of pipe. A new campaign for an eco-friendly clothing brand, I replied, glancing up from my slides. They want to target Gen Z without sounding fake or greenwashing. Sounds tricky. It is. I spent the weekend researching TikTok trends. I feel ancient, and I'm only 33. He chuckled warmly. I'm 35, and I still don't understand half the stuff my teenage niece talks about. You have a niece? 2 nieces and a nephew. My sister's kids, he said, a fond smile crossing his face. They're great, but exhausting. Do you have any of your own? I asked, then immediately regretted it. Maybe that was too personal. No, he said simply. Haven't found the right person yet. He paused. Or guy, I should say. My fingers froze on the keyboard. Was he telling me he was gay? The casual way he'd said it, like it wasn't even a big deal, made me wonder if he'd noticed something about me. Some unintentional signal I'd given. Oh, I managed. Yeah, I get that. Our eyes met briefly. There was something there. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. Before I could respond, my laptop chimed with an incoming call. That's my team, I said quickly, adjusting the screen. I need to take this. Alex nodded and returned to his work. As I slipped into professional mode, greeting my colleagues, I remained aware of his quiet movements in the background. The occasional clank of metal, a soft curse when something didn't go smoothly. At one point, he needed to shut off the water main again. He mouthed a quick, sorry, as he walked past me. That woodsy scent he carried was stronger now, mixed with sweat and something distinctly him. It was distracting. Matt, did you hear the question? My boss's voice snapped me back. Sorry, I said quickly. There's some construction going on in my building. The call ended 40 minutes later, and I slumped in my chair. That went well, I muttered to myself. Did it? James asked, emerging from under the sink. His forehead was damp with sweat, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong, dusted forearms. Not really, I admitted. I think I just promised a complete redesign by Friday. He winced. Sounds like you need a drink. At 10 in the morning? Maybe save it for after I'm done, he said with a grin, which unfortunately might take longer than I thought. I raised an eyebrow. How much longer? The corrosion's worse than I expected. I'll need more parts from the warehouse. I might not be able to finish today. I groaned, rubbing my temples. So, another day without a kitchen. I'm really sorry, he said, and he actually looked it. I could come back late this afternoon around 6 or 7, but it might run into the evening. I thought it over. My schedule was clear, other than the redesign I now had to start. I don't mind if it's evening, I said finally. I work from home anyway. Alex nodded, beginning to pack up. I'll come back at 6:30 then. Should be able to wrap it up tonight, even if it runs a bit late. As he gathered his things, I hesitated. Should I offer him coffee? It felt oddly nerve-wracking, like I was asking him on a date instead of just being polite. Would you like some coffee before you go? I blurted. I mean, I can only offer instant since the kitchen's a mess. He smiled and something in my chest tightened. That'd be great, actually. Black, no sugar. I busied myself making 2 mugs, hyper-aware of him watching me from the doorway. When I handed him his cup, our fingers brushed, and he held my gaze just a little too long. Thanks, he said, his voice a touch deeper than before. We stood there drinking coffee, making small talk about the unusually warm weather. It should have been mundane, forgettable, just filling time. But every second felt charged with something I couldn't quite name. When he set his empty mug down, I felt a flicker of disappointment. I should get going, he said, lifting his toolbox. But I'll see you this evening, right? Artemupada? 6:30, I confirmed, meeting his gaze, unable to look away from the intensity in his eyes. Then he was gone, leaving me in my half-disassembled kitchen, wondering what the hell had just happened. The rest of the day passed in a blur of emails and design revisions. I threw myself into work, trying not to think about the evening ahead. It was just a plumbing repair, for God's sake, not a date. And yet, I kept glancing at the clock, a flutter of anticipation building as 6:30 drew closer. At 6 o'clock, I caught myself debating whether to change clothes. The idea was so ridiculous, I actually laughed out loud. He was a plumber, here to fix my sink, not a Tinder match coming over for drinks. Still, I swapped out my worn t-shirt for a fresher one, ran a hand through my hair to tidy it up a bit. The doorbell rang at 6:35. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Alex stood there, looking slightly tired but still annoyingly attractive. I noticed he'd changed too. Same uniform, different shirt. Hey, he said, his smile warm. Ready for round 2, I replied, stepping aside to let him in. He walked straight to the kitchen, toolbox in hand. It seemed heavier today. I brought all the parts we should need, he explained, setting it down. Shouldn't take more than a couple hours. Can I get you anything before you start? Water? Coffee? He paused. Water would be great, thanks. I fetched a glass, watching as he laid out his tools with quiet focus. There was something fascinating about how calm and in control he seemed, like he belonged exactly where he was. When I handed him the water, our fingers brushed again. This time it felt intentional. Thanks, he said, looking me in the eyes, for being so patient. A lot of customers get frustrated when repairs take longer. I shrugged, trying to ignore the warmth his gaze sparked in me. It's not your fault the pipes are corroded. Besides, you're easy to have around. A slow smile spread across his face, and my heart did a subtle flip. Good to know, he said, voice soft, before turning back to the sink. I tried to focus on my laptop, but the kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. I kept finding excuses to move, refilling my glass, checking my phone, anything that brought me closer to where he worked. At one point, he asked me to hold a pipe while he tightened a fitting. We crouched together under the sink, shoulders brushing, his arm pressed against mine, solid, warm, and I could feel his breath on my cheek. Almost got it, he murmured, voice low and close. I turned to look at him, just a reflex, and found his face inches from mine. Our eyes locked. Everything else faded. I saw the amber flecks in his eyes, the slight part of his lips. Something flickered between us, tension that hadn't been there before. For a second, I thought he might kiss me, or maybe I would kiss him, but then he cleared his throat and turned back to the pipe. That should do it, he said, his voice rougher than before. I backed out from under the sink, heart pounding loud enough to hear. What was wrong with me? He was just here to fix a leak, not to be ogled. I needed to get it together. I'm going to order some food, I announced, grasping at normalcy. Would you like some? It's the least I can do. You're working through dinner. He emerged from under the sink, wiping his hands. You don't have to. I know, I said, but I'm ordering anyway, and it's always too much for one person. He paused, then nodded. All right, thanks. I wouldn't say no to food. Any preferences? Allergies? I'm pretty easy, he said with a smile that made my stomach flip. Whatever you're having is fine. I ordered Thai from my favorite place, trying to focus on the menu, not the man disassembling my kitchen wall. When I finished, he was studying something on his phone, brow furrowed. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, he looked up. Just checking a reference for the pipe. It's an odd setup. Old building, I said. Everything's quirky. I like quirky, he replied, meeting my eyes again, with a look that made my mouth go dry. Quirky's interesting. The air between us thickened again. I opened my mouth to speak, anything to break the tension, but nothing came. We just looked at each other, the moment stretching, tight as a held breath, until my phone buzzed. That's probably the food, I said, almost relieved. I'll grab it. I all but fled to the door, heart racing. Was I imagining this? The connection? The electricity? I took a moment to breathe before coming back with the food, determined to stay cool, casual, professional. But when I walked into the kitchen, James was holding 2 beers he'd pulled from the fridge. Hope you don't mind, he said, handing me one. Thought we could both use one. Our fingers touched again, this time definitely deliberate. Thanks, I said, my voice sounding a little too breathless. We ate at the kitchen table, tools pushed aside. Conversation flowed easily. Movies, work, books. He was funny, insightful, and the way he told stories made me laugh, made me lean in. So how'd you get into plumbing, I asked. My dad was in construction, he said. I helped him out during summers in high school. Got good with my hands. He held my gaze a beat longer than necessary before continuing. After college, I tried an office job, but it wasn't for me. I like solving problems, working with my hands, and honestly, it pays better than people think. I believe it, I said, especially when you're saving people from floods at weird hours. He chuckled. Yeah, the emergency calls add up. What about you? He asked. Always been in marketing? Pretty much, I said. Started in graphic design, moved into strategy. I like the creative side, but I'm not good enough at art to do it full time. I doubt that, he said, eyes warm. You seem pretty talented to me. There it was again, that hum in the air, that sense of something building. I took a long sip of my beer. The room felt smaller, more intimate, like the space between us was narrowing without either of us trying. He glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. I should probably finish the repair, he said, but made no move to stand. Right, I said, just as reluctant. It's getting late. Still, neither of us moved. The silence stretched. Not awkward, just full. Like we were both waiting for something neither of us had the courage to start. Our eyes met. Something shifted. The professional mask was slipping. Matt, he began, voice softer now. I hope I'm not reading this wrong, but... His phone rang, loud and sudden. He grimaced, checking the screen. Damn, it's my boss. Give me a sec. I nodded as he stepped into the living room. My heart thundered in my chest. What had he been about to say? Was I imagining this pull? When he came back, his expression was apologetic. I'm really sorry, he said. There's an emergency at another site. Flooded apartment. They need everyone. Disappointment hit harder than I expected, but I tried to hide it. Of course, you should go. I'll come back tomorrow to finish up, he promised. First thing. You don't have to. I want to, he said firmly, his eyes holding mine. I'll be here at 8:30, if that's okay with you. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He gathered his tools, explaining what was done and what still needed work. I walked him to the door, painfully aware of every inch between us. At the door, he turned to me. Matt, about what I was going to say. It's okay, I said gently. We can talk tomorrow. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Tomorrow, he echoed. Then before I could react, he leaned in and pressed a soft, brief kiss to the corner of my mouth. Something to think about, he whispered, until then. And then he was gone. I stood there, heart racing, skin tingling where his lips had touched. Slowly I closed the door, leaning against it like it might hold me up. My mind spun. This wasn't anything like I'd expected when I called for a plumber yesterday, but as I touched the corner of my mouth, where his kiss still lingered, soft, intentional, I couldn't regret a thing. The apartment felt different after he left, quieter, emptier. His cologne still lingered, subtle, woodsy, like a memory. I wandered to the kitchen, barely noticing the half-full beers or the dishes. I should have cleaned up. Instead, I stood there, fingers grazing the edge of the chair where he'd sat, wondering, did he feel it too? This pull, this electricity, this thing that didn't have a name yet but was impossible to ignore. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at that table, hearing his laugh, watching his eyes crinkle when he smiled. Feeling that kiss, the space between us closing, like it had always been meant to. By morning, I was a mess of exhaustion and anticipation. I kept checking the clock like a teenager before prom. Just be normal, I told myself. Be calm. I showered longer than usual, let the water soothe my nerves. Tried on 3 outfits before settling on something casual, but just polished enough to feel intentional. He's just coming to fix the sink, I told my reflection. That's it. Get a grip. But when the doorbell rang, exactly at 8:30, my heart leapt. I froze, took a breath, smoothed my shirt, then walked to the door. I opened the door, not expecting to see James like that. He wasn't in his usual gray work shirt and cargo pants. Instead, he wore fitted jeans and a simple blue button-down, the sleeves casually rolled up to his forearms. The color brought out the warmth in his eyes. There was something boyish in the way he shifted on his feet, nervous but sure of himself. He held his toolbox in one hand, the other tucked into his pocket like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Before I could say a word, he spoke. His voice was low, steady, but carried a quiet uncertainty. Hey, I wasn't sure if this was okay, but I figured I owed you a proper good morning. I called in and took a personal day, he said. I told them I'd finish your job myself, off the clock. If that's all right with you? I just stared at him, trying to process what he meant. You took the day off? For my sink? A slow smile spread across his face, warm, full of promise. Not exactly for the sink, no. The meaning was clear, hanging in the silence between us like a question already answered. My heart picked up speed. I stepped aside, inviting him in. In that case, I said, trying to steady my voice, maybe we should talk before you finish the repair. I'd like that, he replied as he stepped inside. I closed the door behind him, and the soft click felt final somehow. Something had already shifted, quietly, irreversibly. What began as a simple plumbing emergency had become something else entirely, something electric, unexpected, charged with possibility. Alex set his toolbox down by the wall with a quiet thud that grounded us in the moment. But when he turned back to me, the look in his eyes told a different story. Soft, steady, filled with something unspoken but unmistakably clear. The kind of gaze that feels like a question and an answer all at once. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. He took a slow step forward, then another. I met him halfway. Our lips met like they had been waiting. His kiss was deeper, more certain than the one from the night before. His hand slid to my waist, mine pressed to his chest, fingers curling into the soft cotton of his shirt. There was no rush, only a long-held ache finally finding release. The world narrowed to just us, the pull of breath, the brush of lips, the warmth rising between us. He gently guided me backward, our steps unhurried, until the backs of my knees touched. The couch. I sank down, pulling him with me. His weight pressed against mine, grounding and exhilarating all at once. Our hands moved slowly, almost reverently. We were learning each other by touch, like discovering a map we already half knew. The air filled with quiet gas, deepening breaths, and the low murmur of his voice near my neck, whispering my name like it meant something new. It wasn't just physical, it was layered, complicated in the best way. Like every moment leading up to this had meant something. Every glance, every near touch, every hesitation. It had all been a prelude. Now we were writing the next part. Later we lay tangled together, the morning light spilling through the blinds in golden stripes across his bare shoulder. His fingers traced slow patterns along my arm. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. I turned my head and rested it against him. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not because I knew where this was going, but because I didn't. And somehow that felt like the most honest thing of all. Sometimes the most meaningful connections don't come with warnings or big declarations. They arrive quietly, like water finding its way home, softening you, shaping you, changing everything in their path. And this time, I was ready to let it in. What had started as a plumbing emergency had turned into something more, something unexpected, thrilling, full of hope. As he turned to face me again, eyes warm and open, I realized something. The most important connections don't always make sense. They just happen. They flow into your life when you least expect them, like water searching for a place to belong. What now? Where do we go from here? The questions echoed louder than anything else in the stillness between us. If we kept going, if we followed wherever this strange magnetic pull was leading, how would we explain it to the world? How could we make anyone understand? They'd only see lines crossed, rules broken, something reckless, not something real. I didn't have the answers. I don't think he did either. But I knew this much. We couldn't undo it. Not the way he kissed me like it meant everything. Not the way I let him in. Not just into my home, but into something deeper. Something I hadn't opened in a very long time. Yes, fear was there. Yes, it would be complicated. But there was no going back. I didn't know if this was love or desire or simply the shock of two lives crashing into each other. But it felt like it mattered. Like a moment that splits time into a before and an after. And now we were standing at the edge of the after. So I'll ask you honestly, what would you do in our place? Would you walk away? Pretend it never happened? Call it a mistake and move on? Or would you risk everything, step into the unknown, hand in hand with someone who might just change your life forever? Let me know in the comments, because right now I'm too deep in it to see clearly, too wrapped up in this gravity to pretend I have the answers. And maybe, just maybe, your perspective might help me figure out what comes next.